Okay, let's jump right in. Welcome to this exclusive explainer where we are unlocking the absolute secrets of Cambridge IT 9626. Specifically, we're taking a magnifying glass to section 10.4, the need for generic file formats. Now, I know it can be a pretty dense topic, but today we're completely stripping away the confusion. We're going to look directly at what the examiners are actually demanding from you so you know exactly how to score those top marks.
And honestly, you really need to care about this. Here is the absolutely crucial point. Understanding generic file formats accounts for roughly 15% of your total paper 2 marks. Think about that. That is a massive chunk of your final grade wrapped up in just one specific subsection. It's really a foundational pillar, and it can literally make or break your performance on exam day.
So that naturally brings us to a really big question. Why is evaluating evidence about file formats so incredibly challenging for students? Well, to answer this, we didn't just guess. We went straight to the principal examiner reports. We wanted to see exactly what earns high marks, and more importantly, where students are consistently dropping them. Because it's about so much more than just knowing your CSVs from your TXTs, right? It's about showing the analytical depth required to explain exactly why we need formats that ensure software independence and cross-platform interoperability.
To get you there, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the core theoretical foundations, then unpack the method mark strategy, move into mastering critical analysis, and finally, look at the top examiner warnings.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Core Theoretical Foundations. So the examiners highlight something they call a theoretical architecture. And yeah, that sounds super academic, but what it really means is that the benchmarks here aren't just about rote memorization. They require logical, structured reasoning based on precise definitions and causal relationships. Top-scoring candidates don't just memorize definitions, they integrate this knowledge across the entire syllabus. They show exactly how a generic file format, like a .csv, impacts the wider IT ecosystem, rather than just simply reciting what the acronym stands for. Building on that architecture, the assessment targets 3 very distinct cognitive domains: knowledge and understanding, application, and analysis. Essentially, the framework prioritizes analytical depth over superficial breadth. The examiner really wants to see the underlying why and how. For example, why is a comma-separated values file specifically chosen to transfer database records between completely incompatible proprietary systems? And then, can you apply that directly to the exam scenario?
All right, let's move on to Section 2, the method mark strategy.
Check out this direct quote from the examiner's playbook. Emphasize the method mark strategy, where marks are awarded for process. This is a huge reminder for us. Practical application is a professional skill. Even if your final conclusion has a slight error, if you show a systematic, logical process, you secure vital method marks. Process is everything here. So how do you actually guarantee those method marks? You follow this exact 5-step standardized sequence. First, deconstruct the question. Second, extract the relevant data from the scenario. Third, select your analytical framework. Fourth, execute your analysis with really clear notation. And finally, verify and present your results using perfect terminology. I promise you, this processing sequence is exactly what examiners are scanning for when they're grading your paper.
Now let's dive into Section 3, Mastering Critical Analysis.
There is a really stark contrast in how students approach analysis. Standard answers usually just rely on superficial breadth, like maybe just identifying basic similarities between generic file formats. But the top-scoring answers, they dive deep. They identify similarities and differences. To pull this off, you've got to use comparative connectives, support your comparisons with actual evidence from the scenario, and draw firm conclusions about their relative importance.
Getting to that top tier requires a major mindset shift. Evaluative thinking means you are actively questioning assumptions, considering different perspectives, and justifying your decisions with solid evidence. You literally cannot just take the data at face value. You have to show the examiner that you are critically assessing how these formats are professionally applied in the real world.
To make sure you're doing this, apply this specific checklist to guarantee quality. Your extended answers absolutely must hit these 4 analytical benchmarks. 1. Identify the format's limitations. 2. Note any assumptions made in the scenario. 3. Consider alternative interpretations or alternative formats. And 4. Assess how all these factors affect your final conclusion. Hitting these 4 points proves you understand the wider impact of your technical decisions, like why you might recommend a plain text file over a proprietary word processing document, just to prevent formatting errors.
Finally, Section 4,
top examiner warnings. Examiners have explicitly noted 3 huge traps that constantly cost students easy marks. Trap 1, forgetting proper output formats. Trap 2, forgetting to check the overall presentation of data. And Trap 3, honestly, the most critical one of all, providing generic answers that are completely disconnected from the exam's context. Your knowledge of file formats has to be grounded in the specific scenario they give you, or it simply will not score full marks, period.
And that leads us to the ultimate examiner alert. The report states, candidates consistently confuse key terminology. Always define terms before using them in extended responses. This is so important. Never, ever assume the examiner will just give you the benefit of the doubt. If you're discussing a format's interoperability, just define it briefly before you start analyzing its impact. Set your baseline first.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to think about. How will you adjust your exam strategy today to guarantee your method marks on your next past paper? Remember, structure, precision, and critical evaluation are your keys to capturing that massive 15%. Practice that 5-step sequence, always define your terminology, and never, ever leave your knowledge out of context. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into Cambridge IT 9626. Now get out there and push for that analytical depth.